Just to review, last week we spoke about the third agreement. And these are inner agreements. They're agreements that we unconsciously have made with ourselves and we live by. And the goal of this series, the goal of the book, the goal of these sermons, these talks, these lessons, is to make what's unconsciously controlling our life become conscious. Because when we're conscious, then we can actually express the power of choice. We can actually express God in situations when we become aware where our power is. And so last week we spoke about the third agreement. The third agreement was don't make assumptions. You remember we played the little Odd Couple video. It's on my Facebook page. If you know somebody you'd like to share it with, not yourself, of course. And so don't make assumptions was to be courageous. It takes courage to not make assumptions and live by that agreement. It takes courage to ask questions when we're not clear. It takes courage to express what we really desire and want to other people and when we're not in agreement with other people's desires or wants for us. It takes some real courage to communicate clearly with other people. And when we learned last week, what we learned last week was the payoff, if you will, is great, because when we don't make assumptions, when we live from our own desires, and when we communicate very clearly with other people, we avoid misunderstandings, and we avoid sadness and hurt and drama that shows up. And so this brings us to the fourth and final agreement, which is always do our best. Always do our best. And this step is what the writer Don Miguel Ruiz calls the action step. You see, it's this step that brings to life the other three agreements. It's this step that brings to life when we catch ourselves living from an assumption that's not true. It's this step that calls us higher when we become aware, wow, I'm taking this personally, it looks like. And so I want to define really what it means to always do our best. And this is one of those situations, I think, where it's far more powerful to explain what it is not than what it is. Because when I say always do our best, you know, there's 100 or so of us in the room. We get 100 or so definitions. Because my best to me is going to be different than your best to you. And my best to me is also going to be different than any one of your bests of how you perceive me. And so there's all of these different, pictures floating around the room. But let me tell you what it is not. Always do our best. Misconception number one. To do our best is not mean to be the best. Okay, too often we were raised, and it's a good thing, to be raised to be the best, to come in number one, and be doing our best is personal to us. It has nothing to do with other people. Running a race track, there may be 8 lanes. To do my best in that race has nothing to do with the 7 other runners. That's a competition for first place, but doing our best is not waking up and saying, I'm going to be in first place today. It's waking up and saying, I'm going to be the best that I can be in today. You see, when I used to hear doing my best, I always thought it meant being the best. Many of us were raised that way. Make the highest grade, be the best athlete, be the best mother, be the best parent, be the best father. But it meant there was some sort of winning aspect to it. But it's not a competition. Doing my best is for me, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. It has nothing to do with other people. The second misconception is we think that when we have to do our best, it involves some sort of sacrifice or suffering. Okay, and that is not true. All right? Don Miguel Ruiz writes, "We are not here to sacrifice our joy or our life. We are here to live, to be happy, and to love." And he tells a story on page 77 of the book. There was a man, and this man wanted to know what he needed to do to transcend, to overcome, to achieve. And he went to the master and asked the master, "Master, if I meditate for 4 hours a day, how long will it take me to transcend?" The master thinks a minute and says, "If you meditate for 4 hours a day, you will most likely transcend in 10 years. And so then the guy says, the student is like, Master, well, what if I meditate for 8 hours a day? Thinking that he can do better. He has to do better. Then the master says, looks at him. He says, if you meditate for 8 hours a day, perhaps you will transcend in 20 years. 4 hours a day, 10 years, but if I double up, it takes me 20 years. And he's like, why? This doesn't make sense, And the master replies, you are not here to sacrifice your joy or your life. You are here to live, to be happy, and to love. If you can do your best in 2 hours of meditation, but waste 8 hours instead, you will only grow tired, miss the point, and you won't enjoy life. Do your best, and perhaps you will learn, no matter how long you meditate, you can live, love, and be happy. And so, in other words, when we're doing our best, it's not about requirements of time or specific, responsibilities we put on ourselves to try and meet something. We don't have to sacrifice and suffer. What does doing our best really mean? Now I've given you 2 examples what it doesn't mean, okay? First, it doesn't mean that we have to be the best. We don't have to pray the longest, the loudest, the hardest. And it doesn't mean that we have to suffer and sacrifice. Well, what does it mean? Well, you know what? I think Jesus the Christ gave us a really simple formula. In the 5th chapter of Matthew, in the 41st verse. Not even a whole sentence. What he says is, if anyone forces you to go the 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Understand that we understand Scripture is always the shift in consciousness. We don't look at it as a historical lesson. We look at it as the movement of ideas in our mind. And so at that time, the law allows a Roman soldier to make any person carry their belongings for a Roman mile. In other words, any one of us could be walking down the street, and a soldier could walk by and make one of us carry the military, backpack or whatever they have, their supplies, for 1 mile. And 1 mile in the Roman law was 1,000 paces. And so what this is saying is that outside requirements can make us, carry what they want for a mile. But then there comes a point when we want to do our best, where we can take our power back. See, the soldier outside, the requirement, the race, the competition, school, people, places, things, often set requirements on us. But the true understanding is going the extra mile takes our power back. It takes it from the outside and makes it an inner understanding. This is how we get that phrase, go the extra mile. What it means is we move from a situation, job-related, relationship-related, health-related, money-related, finance-related, and we feel like we have to make this. We have to make this amount of money. We have to do this to make someone else happy. We have to do this or that for our health, Do you ever know, you cannot really go to the gym and enjoy the gym if you're doing it for an outer experience. You know what I'm saying? It's about going the extra mile on that treadmill. Where does it go? It's from within. It's from that spirit that we meditated about. It's from our first nature, our first self, our spiritual self. And so it means we can go beyond what we even expect for ourselves when we let the expectations go. I mean, that's really ironic. It doesn't make sense. But if you really step back and think about it, when we set up expectations for ourselves, we're actually creating a lid or a boundary many times rather than a goal or a dream or a destiny. And so what are some practical ways? We've spoke about the spirituality. We understand what Don Miguel Ruiz says. We understand, metaphorically what it means if someone forces us to go 1 mile, we go the second mile, that it's really an inner shift in our head that lets go of all people, places, things, powers, and principalities outside of ourselves, and really doing our best is a personal, relationship that we have with ourselves in any given day. Well, there's 2 questions I want to share. They're right out of the book. To be practical about this, what are 2 practical steps that we can take from today forward? The first is, am I doing my best at this moment? And that is an inner contemplation. Don't solicit. That's not a survey you take from everybody outside of you. Because you'll get everything from an A to an F. You know what I mean? Depending on what people think your best is for you. No, it's in this moment, what am I doing my best? In this moment, am I doing my best? It sounds simple, but really it's an invitation to mindfulness and self-awareness. It really is. Self-awareness is the first step. I've shared that every Sunday for weeks now. Whatever the agreement is, whenever we seek transformation, change, whenever we seek a revelation, whenever we look for a new perspective, whenever we're looking for an answer to a prayer, self-awareness is always the first step. You see, because if we pause and actually become aware, we recognize who we are in that situation and not what that situation is doing to us. When we pause and step back in a place of full mindfulness and self-awareness, we take into consideration our level of energy at that moment, the time we have, other obligations we have. We take into consideration how we are feeling physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically. Our best changes. What would it take for me to be my best right now? That is the question to ask. You see, if we ask the question and we sense we're not doing our best, that's the road that diverges in the woods. And the 2 roads that we can go down is we can beat ourselves up that we're not doing ourselves the best, and that is the road of guilt and shame. And that doesn't excite us. That doesn't inspire us. That doesn't transform us. But then there's the road we can take that says, right now, what can I do? What is that one step I can do with that physical situation, with that financial situation, with the relationship issue? What is the one thing I can do today that when I lay my head down to sleep this evening, I feel good about myself? Remember when we studied Chris Gardner's book, there was a chapter, and the chapter was Baby Steps Count as long as we're going in the right direction. In other words, no matter how small the step is, as long as we're moving in the right direction, baby steps count. Too often, the world, the outside, what Charles Fillmore would call, earth and the heaven and earth consciousness, the material. Too often we can look at a situation from that worldly mindset, and it is overwhelming. It's overwhelming. We don't know. We try and figure out, the whole situation at once. And then we don't move at all. We don't even take a baby step. Because in our mind, it's so overwhelming. And when we're doing that, is I invite you to catch yourself. And because self-awareness at that moment will show us we're in the future, we're regretting the past, and we're usually, crucifying ourselves for something. And nobody's home in the present moment. We're mind beings. We're consciousness beings. Transformation takes place when a decision is made, when a new choice is made, when we invoke the power and presence of God in a situation where we feel a spot where God is not. But the truth is, there is no spot where God is not when we take that breath and allow God to be God in the right now moment. See, the writer, he says our best will vary. In other words, we can't have these hard and fast rules and expectations for the days and the moments and the hours of our life. We have to be flexible and allow God to be God in every situation. And in every moment, our invitation is to be the best that we can be in that moment. He writes, under any circumstance, always do your best and no more and no less. And keep in mind, your best is never going to be the same from one moment to the next. Why is that? Well, he answers the question. Because everything is alive and changing all the time. So our best sometimes will be high quality, other times it won't be as good. It won't meet. Tomorrow, maybe we won't meet the expectations that we set for ourselves yesterday. But if we're the best me that I can be tomorrow, then we will wake up and we'll be refreshed and we'll recognize the confidence that it builds by always celebrating those baby steps, no matter how small, instead of crucifying ourselves for that woulda, coulda, shoulda. Because that never brings us when I would have, I could have, I should have. That always separates us from the now moment. That doesn't move us to the second mile. That keeps us walking that first mile over and over and over and over again. And the goal of being our best is a goal that changes, that transforms us in the now moment. He says our best will be different when we are healthy as opposed to sick. Our best will depend on whether we are feeling wonderful and happy or whether we're upset or angry or jealous. He says our best really means our personal best. And as long as we meet and become and express the best that we can be, the goal of doing our best is to be free from guilt, to be free from self-judgment, and to stop thinking we haven't done enough. That is the goal, because when we're out of that, then we're actually living fully in the present, and God is expressing God as God can through us. Because when we're condemning ourselves, we don't move forward. When we're condemning ourselves, we're like running nowhere. When we're condemning ourselves, we're not inspired and energized. We hold ourselves back. And the second question, remember the first question is, what can I do in the now moment? Am I in the now moment? The second question, am I being true to myself? See, it is important to understand that doing our best is not sacrificing the truth of who we are. Okay, some of us have gifts and talents. We all have gifts and talents, but some of us have different gifts and talents. And so we cannot sacrifice that passionate calling that God has placed in our heart because of outer expectations, because we'll never do the best. If we're forcing ourselves to operate outside of our gift, we won't express the greatest potential in us. See, doing our best is not sacrificing all the time. It's letting go and doing the best that we can do in the situation right there. It's not waiting for the change outside. It's not hoping that we wake up in somebody else's life tomorrow. It's not even about a magical prayer. Prayer works when we work it, okay? How do we work prayer? We put that prayer in the prayer box and we walk back with a new perception on the situation. We put that prayer in the prayer box, and if it seems hopeless and if it seems no way out, the point of putting the prayer in the prayer box is to let it go. Not to drag it like some chain in a ball through the rest of the week. Every time that worry shows up, it's that I've given that to the Spirit of infinite potential. I've given that to infinite possibilities. I don't know how it's going to work out, God, but I know it's already worked out in the mind of God, so I just want to listen to that still small voice. You see, every day we can do our best in the one place where transformation occurs in our mind. Okay? Change is about realization. All transformation, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, is always about a belief system. Everything that Jesus the Christ taught was about a transformation of how people believed and perceived God in their lives. And the best that we can do is always going to involve pray and move our feet. Let it go, let God, and then do something. You know, even if it's a small baby step in our mind. Even if what we're doing is letting it go every time the worry shows up. Even if we have to remind ourselves for the next 7 days, I am not going to obsess about that worry. And every time it shows up, I'm just going to be like, God, 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 until I forget about worrying. You see, change, transformation, I'm honest with you, is generally uncomfortable at the beginning. Because it's a new groove. It's a new track. We have these habitual, judges and feelings and thoughts. We have these people that speak to us that aren't even around anymore. We've made them up. We let them live rent-free in our head. And now we're going to change, and they're going to be like, no, you can't change. And we're going to be like, yes, we can change. And it requires awareness, and it requires practice. Okay? If I'm going to run the marathon tomorrow, I am not going to start with 26 miles. Right? I may start with 3 or 4 miles and be thankful that I made it 3 or 4 miles, okay? And then think about how you gradually work yourself up to 26 and a half miles. It's the same in consciousness. It's the same with these 4 agreements. You see, with practice, what happens with these agreements is something wonderful. We start to realize that all of the ridiculous expectations that have been on ourselves have been self-imposed. We start to realize that all of the unreasonable expectations that we have let ourselves down with have been self-imposed. We realize God never places anything on us that is unreasonable or ridiculous, and that there comes a point in our life where we have to seize control of these unconscious agreements in our life and make conscious choices about the people, places, things, experiences, and decisions in our life. Don Miguel, he refers that when people decide to adopt these 4 agreements to create more love and happiness in their life, they have to become like spiritual warriors. But we're going to talk about that next week because, I want to talk about that for a whole Sunday. Let me just conclude today with page 83. God is life. God is life in action. The best way I can say I love you, God, is to live my life and doing my best. The best way to say thank you, God, is by letting go of the past and living in the present moment, right here and right now. Whatever life takes away from me, I just let it go. When I surrender and let go of the past, I allow myself to be fully alive in the moment. Letting go of the past means I can enjoy the dream that is happening right now. That is the new agreement, that we enjoy the dream that is happening right now. God bless you. Amen. Have a great week.